Thank you for clicking on this and watching my first. It is my first instructional video, or at least what I consider to be instructional, because if I had seen this video, I wouldn't have gone through all the problems that I did. This has got to do with the Dillon 550. I just purchased this about 3 months ago. I've been operating off of a RCBS single stage press, and of course the desk mount primer. And when you're loading 100 rounds of handgun ammunition, the last thing you want to do is do 500 strokes of the ram on the single stage, another 100 on the primer press. You got 600 strokes in order to load 100 rounds of ammunition. And that's about an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes if you're moving at a decent pace, and that gets old, especially when you shoot off about 300 or 400 a weekend. Or more, depends on the person, or less. But for me, it was about 300 or 400 rounds, and it took forever. It seems like every day I was in the garage, and it's okay being in the garage, but 600 strokes of the ram stinks. Anyway, so I ended up buying a Dillon 550. Now the 550, I think, is incredible. I've got it set up right now for 40 caliber, and also I've got the down there, the 45. That's about all I've got right now. I don't have anything, I don't have the 9mm or any other calibers at this point. So I've been concentrating on 40 and on 45. 9mm will be my next one to get. Just haven't had that much of a love. Of course, I do have this CZ75 SBO1, but haven't shot it much yet. I actually enjoy shooting my 45s, my 1911s. But herein lies the problem I had with the Dillon. Learning, first of all, how to get the primers to seat properly was my biggest issue. It was the biggest issue I had. I thought I had everything lined up, everything was adjusted, the cup was the right height, and a lot of you know what I'm talking about. It was lined up so it wouldn't grab. It went down nice and smooth, so every time I hit the primer tube, it would automatically center itself. It was fine. The only problem I had is when I pulled the ram down, this bar, the primer bar, wouldn't go back all the way every time. When I'd pull it back like such, this here always had some little extra room to go that way. And what would happen is when you put it down, this little primer cup that you see, which I can't do that and hold that, but you can see a little primer cup there on the bottom sliding back in, that wouldn't go all the way underneath the primer tube right here. And it would go halfway in. It just wouldn't actually accept it. So when it went back up, it never would load a primer into the casing. So that got frustrating. And so I thought, well, simple mechanics, it would seem like if this isn't going out that far, put more pressure on it. So I took this bar and I, right here, just exerted a little pressure out that way, thinking that would put more pressure on it, and it did to some degree. It started feeding better, but not consistently. There'd still be a hang-up occasionally. I went back to the store I bought it from, and he gave me a bunch of different possibilities. One from taking this primer bar out and sanding it on all the corners, so that way when it slid through here, because this is tightened down with 2 screws right here, when it slid through, it would be smoother, so therefore it would glide and come out better. That was one possibility. And then, of course, take some graphite, and they gave me some graphite to put on there and just to coat it a little bit and make it a little smoother. He says also don't torque down these 2 screws as much that hold this assembly on, because that could bind it as well, which are all possibilities. However, it wasn't what I thought it was. I took it, I did take it. I took some automotive wet sandpaper, real fine grit, and just sanded down the edges, all the little rough edges, and just tried to make it a little smoother. Then I took a little bit of graphite and coated it, lightly with a Q-tip, and just got it a little bit coated on there just to make it a little smoother. And then I made sure I didn't torque these screws down. Same problem. You pulled it out, it wouldn't pull out of the way. Well, maybe it's a spring, I thought. Maybe it's it. But what I always thought it was this bar. Put a little pressure. I did that one time, and it worked to some degree. Well, I called Dillon because I couldn't get the answers I wanted, or what I thought I should get. Or let's put it this way, I had to get the answers that were actually working. And I told him everything I did, from sanding this down to the graphite. He suggested not to do the graphite. He says sanding down is not going to hurt it, but he says the machine's new. You shouldn't have to do that. So this little rod here, you have a bend here, and you've got a bend here. I bent it here the first time. Well, that was my problem. He says, you're halfway there. The bend should be, or the bend where I should adjust it is right here. So on this little bend right here, I took this little rod off and then bent this bar up this way a little bit. Just bent it up a little bit. And when I did that, it put enough pressure on this to pull this out each and every time. So now when I pull the bar back, every time it goes out all the way. So that's one cure. If you don't get if the primer cup isn't going under that primer feeder tube each and every time and going directly underneath it, and I'm not saying if you got primers coagulated around there, you know, your primers are all dust and goo and everything else to prevent it from going back. But if you got a cleaned up primer system and that's not feeding into that cup, first thing you want to check is this little rod to see if maybe a little bit extra effort or exert a little pressure or bend right here and cause this to go out more that way. And that should hopefully cure one of your problems on the primer feeding. And that's my first instructional video, and I hope it helps someone out there like it did me. Thanks for watching.